On the last video, I told you that you would need thread, needle, the specific fabric for cross-stitching, and scissors. You also need a pattern, a guide of the drawing you want to cross-stitch. They usually come with markings for where the center is to help you align in the fabric, and also a color guide for you to know which color thread you're going to need. For each colored square, they give you the number of thread to buy from the biggest brands here, Anchor, DMC, and Max. Before we go to a pattern like this with several colors, we should try to practice with a few simple drawings. The patterns are usually done in this, are always done in this paper with squares, because each square in the drawings correspond to one cross stitch on the fabric. The fabric also has squares like this, so you can relate the pattern to the fabric. So just get a piece of paper like this and draw some basic shapes that you can practice transferring to the cross stitching fabric. Here I'm suggesting some simple drawings that will cover most of the situations you have to learn how to transfer to the cross-stitching. A few rectangles aligned, a few ones not aligned, letters. Here I'm starting with the letter O. We'll also practice some spacing between the squares so we can see how we keep the perfect finishing without thread hanging on the back when we have some spaces. And you should also try to add different colors so you can practice that as well. I suggest you really do reproduce all these drawings I'm making, but you can also try whatever you want. And if you want to practice filling a shape, you can also fill the O with another color, just for practice. So here's the fabric, and as you can see, it's also made up of squares, just like the paper we are looking at. And these squares will be the ones we'll fill. When I started stitching, this is the type of thread I used to use. But the color on these ones wash out. So the most common used thread for cross-stitching is this one. Here are the numbers that you can recognize to buy the exact colors that your scheme recommends. This one is an Anchor thread. And this type of thread actually comes with 6 threads that you have to separate to stitch. The common is to use 2 or 3. You see it has 2 ends. If you pull from this outer one, it will just tangle. So find the end that is easier to pull. Pull a piece that you feel comfortable with the length. Cut it out, and then you have to separate 2 threads. Be patient because they tend to tangle as you pull them. So carefully just separate, let it unroll and separate 2 threads. And then you can thread the needle. After you start using your thread, you can also keep them on those little plastic tabs so you keep them organized. The needle, as I said, should be a round point needle. Here I'm using the number 26. The number 24 also works well. And when you thread the needle, we tend to wet or lick a little bit the end of the thread to make it easier. So the one you pull through the needle is the one you should leave longer. So you start using from that one that's a little bit wet, because it's going to wear out easier. Because we're using 2 threads, you can also choose to pull just 1 thread, and that comes much easier from the bunch, and then just use it doubled. If you choose to do like this, to avoid that the needle keeps moving along the thread, you can give a little knot. Just make a loop and then pass the needle through it, and that will secure the needle in place if you're using a doubled thread. I'll try to do that again more in focus. So just thread the needle, try to place it in the center, make a little loop, and then pass the needle through that loop, giving it a little knot to secure the needle in place. After you do that, just make sure to cut the ends so the two ends of this thread are the same length. You're good to go. We'll start practicing with this rectangle, which is 3 lines of 6 points. For now, it doesn't matter where we start in the fabric, we're just practicing the stitching. So we just choose a square to start, put the needle through the hole on the top of the square, and it should come out on the bottom of the square. Just leave a little piece of thread, more or less the length of about 2 squares of the fabric. If it's too long, it's no problem, we can cut it later. And then we just work on diagonal, going to the next line of holes, again putting the needle through the top one and coming back on the bottom one. Make sure to trap that end of the thread. And just keep doing that for as many points as your pattern requires. In this case, we're going to make 6 points. So again, go through the top and come back through the bottom. When you make each stitch, make sure to trap that end of the thread. And then just go in diagonal. Do that for 6 stitches. When we get to the end of the 6th stitch, then we just start working our way back. Again, in making a diagonal to now close the X, needle through the top, comes back on the bottom, working 1 square at a time. When you get to the last stitch, instead of putting the needle through the top and coming back on the bottom, put the needle through the top and come back on the next horizontal line of holes. So we're just going to work our way to now go to the next row of stitches. And because the line is now at the top, we work the other way around now, going with the needle through the bottom and coming back at the top. The result is the same, a diagonal line. And the process is the same. We're always putting the needle on the vertical, on the next line of holes, to the right, and then coming back to the left. Just that now we are working from bottom to top. And when we finish this row, the thread is already ready to do the 3rd line, and now we are back to doing from top to bottom. Make sure that every time you pull the thread, you just pull it enough to get to the end of it, but don't pull it too hard that you end up squishing the fabric. And we're done with the 3 rows. Now we just have to hide the thread behind the stitches. 2 or 3 stitches should be enough. And then cut it really close. In this case, you can clearly see where I hid the threads from start and finish. That means that the squares on this fabric are too big for me to hide them completely with only 2 threads. So I should have pulled 3 threads instead. And here's the back. That's what makes the perfect finishing. All the lines are going the same direction, vertical, and there are no threads loose on the back because they're all hidden in the front. Keep practicing this square, and on the next video, we'll try the different shapes. For now, just keep practicing your stitches, and I'll see you in the next video.